With each new generation of Monster Hunter, there have been new additions, mechanics, and more importantly, monsters that have defined the evolution and shaped the identity of that era in the series. You know, I've been trying to come up with a good intro that builds excitement and is engaging. That's all I got, so I'm just gonna say it. The third generation of Monster Hunter is by far my favorite, and I believe it is the most experimental and unique generation that changed everything. Monster Hunter 3 was experimental to say the least. It introduced new mechanics that were left in the past, but it laid down foundations that the current games still hold on to. Ironically, there are 3 games in the third generation. There's 3Tri, 3U, and Portable Third. I'll mainly be showcasing 3U because it is 3Tri's expansion, the full game basically. Portable Third was a Japanese exclusive that left out underwater combat, the thing that made Monster Hunter 3, so no. Also, I only recorded 3 Ultimate, so it's the only footage I have. With that being said, let's dive, figuratively and literally, into my favorite Monster Hunter game. The game begins with an earthquake. The people in their home are under disarray. The tremors are so bad that the quality of the cutscenes is 360p at best. Seriously, the game looks great in gameplay, but the cutscenes are mad doo-doo. I mean, I don't care. These games aren't known for their stories anyway, so we press on. You're a new hunter sent by the guild to discover the mystery behind these quakes in a small fishing settlement named Moga Village. Moga Village is easily one of, if not my favorite village in Monster Hunter. Nostalgia is a powerful blindfold, I like to say that, and you know what, I get it. But hear me out on this one. I think I've said enough. Moga Village had such a unique layout and theme in the Monster Hunter series, and this is because the third generation leaned towards a more coastal and sea aesthetic. So of course, the main village would reflect that. It actually takes inspiration from traditional Japanese seaside villages, especially in Okinawa and rural Honshu Shikoku. Hopefully I said that right. But look, they got the wooden docks, the water, the fish. Of course, it's fictional, so the layout is not necessarily the most practical, and I think the floor is not up to code, but I still love it. Like most Monster Hunter games, your journey as a hunter begins with performing simple tasks, such as repairing the base on D Island, gathering quests, and hunting Abdanoth. I mean, I knew about everything from my days on the 3DS, so it didn't take me long to escape the leash and start the actual game. At the core of this generation lies a single guiding idea, one that shaped every design choice in the game. What I'm gonna do is we're gonna start there and see how it flows into everything that defines the Monster Hunter experience. What is that, you might be asking? Underwater combat was introduced in the third generation, and it was so well received that it never appeared in a Monster Hunter game again. To this day, there is a divide between those who love and those who hate underwater gameplay. So let's start with the bad. The controls. Funny enough, the game in Japan was, I don't know why I said it like that, Japan was received with a wider tolerance for it compared to the US. I would say if underwater combat was like a Steam review, it would be overwhelmingly negative. I'm one of the few people who liked underwater combat, but I can see why people hated it. For one, you're at a clear disadvantage because the monsters are way more mobile underwater. The older games do have clunky controls, I will admit that, but underwater combat was especially bad, for sure. You were a sitting duck sometimes, especially since there's no Superman dodge to negate all damage. I never had problems with the controls or cameras personally, but an argument can definitely be made. In water, your camera was fully unlocked. You could control it however you pleased, 360 rotation up and down, because the monsters could theoretically attack from any angle. What didn't help was the fact that the first console 3 Ultimate released on was the 3DS, a small portable console that made the controls a bit wonky. It was quite the performance to get it to work actually, because the only ways you could control said camera was the D-pad underneath the joystick used to control your hunter, or the D-pad on the touchscreen. Yes, there was a lock-on camera option, but I'm weird. I just didn't like using it. I don't know why. I just prefer to have control of the camera myself. You had to basically stop moving for a second to adjust your camera, and in the midst of fighting a monster, you'll probably get nuked by a Silver Wrath or something. And you know what? That's what I get for using the bow. Now, if you were a rich fancy pants boy like me, I was not, but I had the 3DS XL, and I also had the Legend of Zelda one, the gold one. It was freaking sick. And I still have it, and it's like 300 bucks now. I'm like, oh yay! But they had a miniature joystick thing in the corner that acted as your camera controls. It was way easier. You could fight and control the camera now. This time around, I was using an emulator with a PlayStation 5 controller, so it was even better. But back then, controlling the camera, your character, and trying to get hits off where your depth perception was awful, you know, it didn't exactly put a smile on many people's faces. You couldn't really gauge how far you were sometimes, so some of your attacks would miss. I can attest to this because I fought Abyssal Laggy recently, and my giant larger-than-life switch axe would miss about like 10% of the time. Speaking of big weapons, also, because I didn't know where else to put this, but I wanted to talk about it. Right after I hit G rank, my save file got corrupted, so I had to basically reset and start over. 60 hours of my life gone in an instant. I could have gotten a girlfriend or invested in my 401k at that point. But I thought to myself, you know what? Since we're starting over, let's really start over. I decided for the first time in my Monster Hunter career to give the hunting horn a try. I mean, outside of Monster Hunter Rise. And let me tell you something. I never had more fun in this freaking game. Hunting horn was so much fun, and I truly loved every second of it. I thought memorizing the notes was going to be bad or hard to do for some reason. It wasn't, and it was great. It is now my comfort weapon, surprisingly enough. I just wanted to put it out there and just say, hey, I'm now a hunting horn main. Anyways, all that to say, I'm a huge fan of underwater combat. It was fun back then for me, and with how far we've gotten in the series, mechanically speaking, I am sure underwater combat can be a huge hit. It adds good diversity into the gameplay loop. Not that I ever got bored with Monster Hunter's combat, but fighting both on land and water adds some more flavor to the overall hunt. It was not perfect, but it was still a fun, unique idea that is now lost inside the third generation. However, I believe it had some major influence in the later installments. For example, Monster Hunter Rise. The wire bugs introduced more verticality in its gameplay, something that underwater combat had too. If you remember anything about this generation, it was underwater gameplay. Capcom was already conducting a risky experiment with this, so they decided to take things even further beyond. Because the underwater combat played such a key role in the third generation's identity, other aspects of the games followed suit. For example, in Monster Hunter 3 Tri, besides Rathalos, Rathian, and Diablos, every other monster was new to the series. And it wasn't just the aquatic monsters, the terrestrial monsters were all new too. It was a total reset for the series. All those older monsters did not return until 3 Ultimate or the 4th generation. Even the platforms 3 Tri was released on were totally different. The first 2 generations, PS2 and PSP. 3 Tri? The Wii. You know, the same console with the funny swinging swords and one of the most difficult bosses in video games. It was a very weird direction Capcom decided to take, but it ended up working because I would have never discovered the series if I didn't find it at GameStop. As of October 2010, Monster Hunter 3 Tri sold over 1 million copies. And apparently, this is AI saying it, so I'm not sure if this is accurate, but it's apparently one of the most played games on the console. But you know what's even weirder? 3 Tri and 3 Ultimate were the only 2 games where the Ultimate version was released on a different console. Nowadays we have expansion packs, so that's not really an issue anymore. But 3 Tri was on the Wii, and 3 Ultimate was on the 3DS and eventually the Wii U. Technically, you could say Generations 2 because it started on the 3DS and Generations Ultimate was on the Switch. However, the Japanese had the Ultimate version on the 3DS. So I'm just gonna say 3 Tri was the only one, makes it better for my title. Now when it comes to the monsters, because there was such a thing as underwater combat, you had more creatures based on marine biology. The example I like to give is the obvious one, Cedius. If we follow the story here, Lagiacrus is the one accused of starting the earthquakes. We kill it, turns out it's not him, earthquakes still happen, and the one to blame is the big furry aquatic Elder Dragon. An Elder Dragon that will never make another appearance as long as underwater combat stays exclusive. We've seen other aquatic monsters make a return in the later games, like Royal Ludroth for example, because they have an underwater and land moveset. It's easy to incorporate. Cedius is fought strictly in the underwater ruins. But I think think he's the perfect monster to represent this entire generation. He's the final boss in the Village campaign, but one that emphasizes the beauty of a monster's design and realism, if we can ignore the freaking 10-minute prologue before we get to the final area. Look, I love this monster, but I hate this part too. Everyone does. It sucks. Just fight Goldbeard. It skips this first part entirely. See, the thing about having underwater combat means you need to add more depth to a monster for it to work. These monsters have expanded animations, larger movesets, and designs that work across both land and water. But what's interesting is that there's a natural imbalance. Some monsters like Lagiacrus are just as threatening on land as they are underwater, which makes sense. I mean, he's the flagship. But then you have monsters like Gobel, who are terrifying in the water, but once they're forced onto land, they become awkward and sluggish, losing most of their advantage. It's really cool to see how different some of these monsters behave when they're out of their natural habitats, and it adds more diversity into their fights. Because of this, these monsters have more depth and realism than most, unique designs that don't relate to any other generation. Now, I'm not saying that any monster after or before the third generation didn't have aquatic features. For example, Namiel. He's a fan favorite. I mean, I love Namiel, and he harbors these marine attributes in a rich color scheme, similar to the vampire squid and comb jelly, both deep-sea creatures. But even then, Namiel was not designed for underwater combat in mind, even if it was based on aquatic life, so its skeletal structure matches most grounded elder dragons. But think about it, can you imagine this thing underwater? I mean, they could get real creative. Maybe it has like a new ability to ink the water, and you could only see the bioluminescent lights. Like, that would be really cool. All this to say, Monster Hunter 3 had some unique monster designs because it had underwater combat. It even added more depth to previously established monsters like Plesioth, who still had a hip check underwater. Dude, why? I did some research just out of curiosity, and I found out that 3 Ultimate has the most exclusive monsters in the entire series, if we're not including Frontier. Not just the underwater ones, but elder dragons too, such as Gen Moran and Dire Moralis, rare species like Abyssal Lagiacrus, subspecies like Green Nargacuga. Look, I don't know what it is, but I have such an affinity for Green Narga. I just love it. Usually I hate it when shiny Pokemon have that disgusting booger green color, but you know what? It works well for a giant panther dragon. Jade Baroth, Purple Ludroth, Glacial Ignactor, Sandbarioth, Giganox. Time and time again, they bring back the penis man, but they never bring back the double PP boy. Bring him back! I miss this monster and his equipment. It was so cool. I mean, all of these guys were exclusive to this generation, about 18 monsters. That's 35% of the entire roster of 3 Ultimate, which is 51 if you can't do the math. If we're talking basic monsters like no subspecies or any of that, it's still quite a high number at 6. 6 monsters that have been under a generational lockdown, and I don't know if I want to let them out, if I'm being honest. I don't want to gatekeep, but it makes the 3rd generation better that way. But if we do get them back later, I will not complain. I would love to see Kuropeko come back. He could have some great interactions with the other monsters. Now, I want to address the question some of you may have. What about the deviants from Generations? There are way more deviants that are clearly stuck in those games. Do they not count? Let's break it down. Not only are there 18 deviants that already tie up with 3 Ultimates exclusives, but they also have 6 original monsters that are stuck in those games. My fake argument is that on a technicality, Generations is a spin-off game. I do not believe that, nor do I treat the games as such. I'm just bringing it up to make some people mad. My real argument is that the deviants, unlike subspecies or rare species, have been resurrected in some ways in the later games, and therefore don't really stand alone. Like, for example, the stupid Apex monsters in Monster Hunter Rise. I hate them with a passion. I think they're useless. It's one of the worst things they've ever done in the series, but those monsters are based on the deviants. As a matter of fact, they're an exact replica. Yes, they have a darker color palette, oh my gosh, but you can clearly see the design differences the deviants have from the original counterparts. Even then, there are still 12 deviants that haven't reappeared and 6 original monsters from Generations. So if anything, both games tie. Deviants are basically the rare species of variants in Monster Hunter, so it's hard to fully classify them as their own being, but you know what? I'll compromise. A 3/5 compromise. Every deviant counts as a 3/5 towards a vote, meaning the deviants together count as 10.8 monsters. And with the 6 original monsters from GU, that's a total of 16.8, 1.2 short of Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate. So it wins based on my very high bias. In the end, it doesn't really matter because 3U has something that no other game has. Listen to me. Come closer. I don't care what anyone says. These two goof nuggets were the best companions you could have on a quest. I loved their personalities, their abilities, the different masks you could equip, their designs. Everything about them was superior to any Palico from any game. The dog from Rise and the Sacred from Wilds are good, but nothing comes close to my boys here. I just wanted to state that for the record before we continue because I had to get it off my chest, and it does add on to my argument here. Anyways, what's my next point? Yeah, that makes sense. When you have such a thing as underwater combat, the locales have to be structured just a bit differently. At least the ones that have underwater areas. Much like the monsters, every single locale in Monster Hunter 3 was new. They didn't bring back any old maps, even in 3 Ultimate. There were a total of 13 brand new locations, but the ones that actually matter, the actual large ecosystems, there were only 6 of them. You had the Deserted Island, one of my favorite locations in Monster Hunter, the Sandy Plains, Flooded Forest, Tundra, Volcano, and Misty Peaks. The Flooded Forest and D Island were the only 2 maps that had underwater areas. We also had smaller locations like the Tainted Sea where you fight Dire Morales, the Underwater Ruins, or the Water Arena, which I never went to. The underwater zones in Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate didn't just add a new mechanic, they changed how you experienced the map. Suddenly you had areas with vertical depth, hidden passages, and entire ecosystems beneath the surface. It made maps feel alive, like you weren't just running across the terrain, but exploring a full environment with layers to uncover. That contrast gave each location more identity. These maps weren't just stages or backdrops, they were habitats. Now as the series evolved, the locales became way more detailed. I mean, look at the Coral Highlands, which also had vertical complexity. Lore-wise, it even tied into another map, the Rotten Vale, and this gave both maps a beautiful connection and juxtaposition. I don't want to take away at all from what Monster Hunter World did, but I want you to understand that 3 Ultimate started it, pioneered it, and had something special with its underwater environments. The Flooded Forest was murky and very cluttered with vegetation and wildlife. You could barely see at times, which made fighting monsters all the more immersive. D Island had some more open spaces with a rich, deep blue, mimicking the ocean. Each location had a personality that extended below the surface, influencing how you navigated, how you fought, and how you understood the monsters. 3 Ultimate didn't just give you places to fight, it gave you worlds that felt like they existed with or without you. Even as the series moved on to bigger, richer maps like the Coral Highlands or the Rotten Vale, there's still something uniquely atmospheric about 3 Ultimate. And diving beneath those waters, it's something that we haven't gotten back since then. We talked about the 3rd generation's biggest experiment and how it influenced the game and why it hasn't returned. So what about the experiments that did survive? Underwater gameplay wasn't the only thing the 3rd generation did differently. The biggest thing besides that was treating the monsters like actual creatures instead of static boss fights. The 3rd generation were the first games to really drive home the realism behind the monsters and their biology. It makes sense why the monsters from here on out looked and acted more lifelike. The monsters in this game had a great sense of presence in the locales and a strong interaction with the terrain, especially for its time. There were nests where a monster would sleep, they would eat when tired, and had different idle animations that showcased their behavior. This was the foundation of Monster Hunter's new direction. This is where Monster Hunter truly mastered creature design, and why I think this franchise has some of the best monsters in the entire industry. Of course, that's just my personal opinion. The weapons also experienced major changes too, with refined movesets. For example, the levels of spirit gauge for the longsword. This became a core mechanic in the future games. The switch axe was first introduced in 3 Tri, the first morphine weapon that led to the charge blade and insect glaive. While the underwater combat didn't stick, the new type of monster certainly did. Leviathans. Think of Mizutsune, Almudron, Somnacanth, and even as recent as Othduna and Jin-Dahad. I mean, underwater combat itself didn't work out, but the byproduct of its very existence led to some of my, and probably your, favorite monsters in the entire series. I mean, when I said that Monster Hunter 3 was a reset for the series, I really meant it. From the gameplay mechanics, modern hub design, maps, monsters, down to the drastic color changes, Monster Hunter was making a new name for themselves. And it worked. Monster Hunter at the time was like a cult-like niche, but thanks to Monster Hunter World, it became more mainstream. But suddenly we now have a giant fan base of hunters from across the world. In Japan, Monster Hunter was always popular, but it took a few games until people started appreciating this game for what it was. Yes, the games are way better now than what they once were, I'm not arguing that. I just think 3 Ultimate was the catalyst, and even then, still had some great ideas that haven't been remade since then. 3 Ultimate is definitely my favorite in the series, if I haven't made that clear enough yet. It was what I grew up with, and how I got introduced to Monster Hunter, so it'll always hold a special place in my heart. This is the point of the video where I say, thank you for watching. I would love to hear your thoughts about these games and what you think might be the best generation in Monster Hunter history. I'm sure plenty of you have your arguments for generations, so I'm all ears. And if you did enjoy this video, be sure to leave a like and to subscribe for more content like this. And I'll see you in the next video. Take care everyone, and of course, stay safe.